process and just generally a less responsive government. So I think that actually having more experience and institutional knowledge in Congress is a good thing.
Right. Robert, same question to you. What do you make of that argument?
That view presupposes that the incentive structure is so powerful to recruit young talent that it'll be fairly easy to do so. That's not the case, and he knows it. I mean, it's become a more dangerous place to live. It's become a financially less remunerative, body to work in, and those. There have been real recruiting challenges that both parties have faced as a result of that. And even leaving aside what Nathaniel has aptly pointed out, that the loss of institutional knowledge from someone who has been around the block and understands how to get things done in the manner of the Lion of Congress, John Dingell, who in his final terms was still running rings around everybody else in the institution in his ability to get things done for his state of Michigan. That's a kind of loss that can't be recouped just by fresh faces, even assuming you can get them.
Well, Nathaniel Rakich, we only have about 30 seconds left or so, but can you give us one note of hope about this, if that exists?
Well, I have 30 seconds to think about it.
I think your pause says all we need to hear. Nathaniel Rakich, Senior Editor and Senior Elections Analyst at 538. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an important conversation. I've really appreciated your input.
Thank you so much.
And Robert Draper, he writes about politics for the New York Times. Robert, thank you very much for your reporting and for joining us today.
Absolutely, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
And listeners, thank you for joining us today. I'm Anthony Brooks. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from BetterHelp, committed to making mental well-being a priority and offering support in taking on everything life demands, with therapists available to communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public. And Seed. Seed's DSO1 is a 24-strain 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic, engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public.
With Election Day quickly approaching, many voters are still wondering what a Kamala Harris presidency would look like, including her foreign policy.
Voters are going to be asking themselves what Harris would do differently, to draw some clear contrast with the outgoing Biden administration, to show how she would inject new life into U.S. foreign policy.
That's on the next On Point.
Always here for you, WAER is supported by Lemoyne College, presenting Evil Dead the Musical. 5 college students go to an abandoned cabin in the woods and accidentally unleash an evil force that turns them all into demons. Opening on Friday, October 25th for a 2-weekend run in the W. Carroll Coyne Center for the Performing Arts at Lemoyne. Tickets and more info at lemoyne.edu/VPA.
You're listening to 88.3 FM, WAER Syracuse, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Syracuse players, they don't find a player box out
They turn around and try to jump up and grab the ball. That's not rebounding. That's not boxing out. That's lazy.
It is nowhere close to an overreaction to say that they can go 500 or better in ACC play.
I think there's something to be said about that specific phenomenon. 5 guys saying, there's no backup plan. It's just us.
Breaking down everything from around the hill.
When you get doubled up on your shots and even one more to put a cherry on top, there's no possible way you can win a lacrosse game.
You can tell it just dissipates out of nowhere. And it's the in-game adjustments that have hurt Syracuse.
And giving hot takes along the way.
Naheem McLeod, they want him to be Jesse Edwards, and he just isn't.
Fran Brown is a home run hire for Syracuse.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. It's Sports Night, and it starts right now.
Welcome to Sports Night on WAER. Luke Burgess and Sam Reese here with you on this Friday night from our Ostrom Avenue WAER studios. You can call us all night long, 315-443-2011, or shoot us a text at 315-556-3929. You can also interact with us on X at WAER Sports Talk. Sam, thrilled to be joined alongside you tonight. We're going to talk about several things. We want to start with Syracuse football because it was a big win. It's going back now almost a week. 6 days ago, SU was down in Raleigh to take on NC State and picked up a win. Not necessarily a pretty win by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a win nonetheless. And Fran Brown's first road ACC win, that was something that this team had really struggled with under Dino Babers and really back before that as well. So certainly relief, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I guess you could call it a relief. I mean, it would have been extremely disappointing if they had come out and lost this game, especially with how poorly NC State has been playing this season, Luke. So, in my opinion, heading into that game, it was one that I expected them to win. They got the job done. As you said, kind of sloppy at times. They almost surrendered that lead in the fourth quarter, which is a concern of mine. I would have preferred to see a full 60-minute performance there because they were completely in control through 3 quarters, but then things got a little bit dicey down the stretch. But you got the victory. You come home, had the bye week before the next game against a very good Pitt team, so you can't really ask for much more.
Yeah, one of those weaknesses for NC State that you were talking about, Grayson McCall, the starting quarterback, he had split time with the freshman C.J. Bailey throughout the season leading into that game, but Bailey was fully taking over with McCall out with an injury, and he wasn't fantastic, clearly has some good tools, but NC State team that was playing heavily depleted, that defense really not what they thought it was going to be at all. On the SU side of the ball, particularly on the defensive side, Justin Barron, who was moved to linebacker after Marlo Wax's injury this season, asking to be played a different role by Fran Brown, played really well. Had his best game there, 8 tackles, which led the team. His performance so far this season, I think, has been really impressive. To me, he's proved that he is an NFL caliber DB, and he should be playing DB. He's not even playing there. I know they had him in that star role before, but the role that he's playing now is still kind of that hybrid. Even though he's listed as a linebacker, he's dropping back into coverage. He's hardly ever blitzing.
Correct.
But when he does, he's good at that too.
Right. I mean, I would say, if I'm going to be honest, Luke, through the start of the season, I was a little bit underwhelmed with Barron's performances up until that point.
Sure.
But then on Saturday, he went out and had the best game of his career. I don't think that's really debatable. He recovered a fumble in the first half, also recorded his second career interception. And you mentioned it. He doesn't apply pressure a ton, but when he's up there on that line, he can make an impact too. He had a sack in this game. So when you're without a guy like Marlo Wax and you're asking one of your leaders in Barron to step up and move to that linebacker position, I was kind of waiting for him to have that statement type of game, and he had it against NC State. I'll give him all the credit in the world, and maybe this is the game where we look at and say this is the moment where Barron really started to play at an elite level, because until this point, Luke, I felt as though these weren't games where we were talking about Barron that much. I mean, he had a couple of solid games, but nothing great in my opinion.
Yeah, the throw that he had the interception on was it was close to a lateral. It was down the line.
Correct.
It was a short throw. So he was more in a corner position than he was in a linebacker
yes.
position when he had that pick. So that's a good sign because, of course, if you're going to play strong safety in the NFL or free safety, you have to be able to intercept the ball. And I thought he looked really solid and certainly has done a really good job of stepping up as a leader of the defense as well.
Yep.
Not that he wasn't before, but with Marlowe Wax on the shelf, it kind of it forces him into that premier role where he's really the guy because there's no one else who's, you've got a lot of young talent on this defense right now.
Sure.
So it's important that he's kind of taken that next step. What do you think about Justin Barron's game right now with his move to linebacker? You can call us 315-443-2011 or send us a text 315-556-3929. The defense was good, but outside of Barron's one sack, only one other sack for the game.
Yeah.
And against UNLV, it was kind of the same story, both the sacks from Fidel Diggs.
Yeah, so it's always the same story.
Right. The defensive pressure, the defensive line has probably been the weakest part of the defense because I think we've really seen a lot of positives from the corners. It's something that he needs to improve. Obviously, Fidel Diggs is a star in the making, and I think that we knew that when he got here. But
correct,
it has been a bit of a struggle for those interior linemen.
It has. Well, Diggs has at times been single-handedly carrying this defensive line. And that's an issue. I mean, no matter how well he's playing, you need some other guys to step up. And I get, injuries are part of the deal, and there are some younger players, on that defensive line that are being asked to do a lot. But, a guy like James Hurd, who I understand he's a freshman, he, for example, is someone I'd like to see really step up because he's getting this experience. Now it's about, taking it to the next level and helping out a guy like Diggs who is doing it all by himself.
Well, remember when originally Marlowe Wax went down, James Hurd was, that week, he was talked about as the guy who was going to step in. I mean, what I want to quickly dive into, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, is maybe more time for King Joseph Edwards. I know that he's a freshman.
I don't disagree.
You already have Marcellus Barnes making an impact
as
a freshman on this defense.
Sure.
So it's not like Fran Brown has any type of rule against playing freshmen.
Yeah.
Why not give him a chance? He was fantastic against Holy Cross. And obviously, yes, that's an FCS
It was Holy
team.
Cross.
Yeah, it's Holy Cross, but 3 sacks is 3 sacks too. I mean, to be able to get off your guy and pursue the quarterback is a skill. And some guys don't have it, and he clearly does have it. So at least give him a shot.
I will say this. Yeah, it is a little confusing because, he did get that shot against Holy Cross. King Joseph Edwards did, and I thought he did prove himself.
Right, yeah. What more could you ask him?
Exactly. I mean, it really doesn't get any better than how he performed with 3 sacks in a single half. And again, I get it's against Holy Cross, but with the issues that this defensive line is experiencing now 6 games into the season, we're already heading towards that latter stretch. I have to think it's sooner rather than later that Fran Brown and the rest of his coaching staff say, hey, we gotta make some adjustments here, switch some things up. And to your point, I do think giving King Joseph Edwards a chance, even in a big ACC game like the one coming up against Pitt, it isn't a bad thing because he showed a glimmer of what he can do in that game against Holy Cross. Give him another shot because someone else has to help out Fidel Diggs on that line.
Why not? I mean, you give him a chance. Like, the worst case scenario is he has a mediocre game and maybe Fidel Diggs just continues.
It wouldn't be any worse than what they've been.
Yeah, exactly. He draws pressure
doing
on that side as an edge rusher right anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's only going to make things easier for Fidel Diggs if they even have the proposed threat of Edwards potentially applying pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get him on that side, he has a bad game, whatever. He was going up against a 6-0 Pitt team.
Right.
If you give him out on that side and he has a good game, that puts him on the map.
And
for
again,
a nationally televised Thursday night game against the 6-0 top 20 team.
And there's no better option, in my opinion, at this moment in time, based on the performances we've been seeing from that defensive line. So there's nothing really to lose by mixing it up and going to a guy like King Joseph Edwards, who, again, I thought proved himself in that one chance he got against Holy Cross. I don't care that he's a freshman. He had a really good performance in that game. Give him another shot.
Should King Joseph Edwards start against Pittsburgh next Thursday? Less than a week from today. Call us 315-443-2011 or send us a text 315-556-3929. It's an enticing proposal. I really do think that giving him a chance, I want to talk about what it could do for his confidence, right?
Yeah.
Because if you give him that shot and he does succeed, all of a sudden now you're looking at a whole new realm of defensive possibilities, right? It takes a ton of pressure off of some safeties and some corners who are having to come up pretty clutch a lot right now to prevent this defense from giving up points. And the Syracuse defense has not been great this year.
No,
in terms of limiting other teams'
whole,
offense,
they have not. I mean, they can't tackle too.
Yeah, and so
ridiculous.
you put if you were giving QBs less time to throw, they have to make more split-second decisions. You're going to get receivers who are in tighter spots. Makes it a little bit easier to tackle.
Sure.
Right. We're talking about getting Marlowe Wax back, maybe against Pitt, maybe against Virginia Tech, if not this upcoming week. Well, if you provide some support on the outside, I mean, I think. Look at any NFL college team that has good edge rushers. It completely revolutionizes what your defense can do. It makes it easier for everyone else if you have guys who can get pressure from the outside. Break the pocket down. You have a QB coming up in Holstein, just like you had last week with C.J. Bailey, who can use his legs.
He can run.
And if you make the pocket collapse around him, it all of a sudden becomes a lot harder for him to actually utilize his legs.
And that's the thing. If Syracuse can find a way to just apply more pressure more frequently, because more times than not, the opposing quarterback has had way too much time to make up his mind, and that's given them a clear advantage in games and has put Syracuse at an obvious disadvantage on the defensive side of things. So if you can find a way to insert a player like King Joseph Edwards, who, in my opinion, could prove his worth in a game like the one coming up against Pitt, all of a sudden you are making it a lot more uncomfortable for the opposing team's quarterback. And to your point, it changes the whole complexion of how a game could play out, because all of a sudden they have to scramble and go to plan B sometimes, and they don't have all that time to find their open receivers. Again, this is one of the most important aspects of the game of football. It's an area where I'm not too confident at the moment for Syracuse.
Right. If you look at FBS opponents this season, outside of the NC State game this past week, Syracuse had given up 20 points from its opponent in every single game.
Yep.
You go back to that Ohio game. That Ohio offense is not particularly good. No. And, of course, that's the first game of the season. A lot has changed since then. But, you gave up 28 to Georgia Tech. You gave up 26 to a Stanford offense that looked really dull coming in.
Yeah,
and lose that
not a
game.
good offense.
If the defense has the potential to win you that game, if they play well enough.
Yeah.
And they just didn't.
And the thing about the defense, too, is there's spurts in games where, they have a couple of nice stands.
Yeah.
But then there's also stretches like that NC State game in that fourth quarter where they completely collapse at times, can't tackle a player or allow a big play. There's busted coverage sometimes downfield. It's not just the defensive line that's the problem. That's the primary issue, of course. But they failed to put together complete performances. I've seen glimpses of what they can do, but there needs to be more consistency there, especially with some big ACC matchups coming up.
Yeah, I mean, the toughest part of the schedule is ahead, in my eyes. And
yeah, it is.
You give a guy like Edwards a chance, I think he could make an impact. The defense has been okay. The offense has still been really good. And obviously the main reasoning for that has been Kyle McCord, right? It's 300 passing yards in every single game this season. And
6 games now, wow.
Only threw it 42 times, which is crazy to say only before you say that, but, it's better than 60, which is what we saw a few weeks before against UNLV, given that game did go into overtime. But, yeah, there was a heavy reliance on Kyle McCord throughout most of this season. There still is. They have been able to work in the run game a little bit more, but clearly Kyle McCord is the focal point for this offense, and he has come as advertised.
Yes, and maybe... No, I wouldn't say and even more. I've been very impressed though with Kyle McCord, and I've still had skepticisms throughout, the first few games, and even a couple weeks ago, still had a few concerns in terms of the way in which he plays sometimes, just for the fact of the matter that he can't run the ball, and sometimes he tries to force passes.
He does, and the interceptions have been an issue.
Correct, but if we want to focus on that last game against NC State, this was the performance in which I was most impressed by Kyle McCord, because he threw the ball a bit less, 42 times. 74% of his passes were completed. He went 31 for 42. He did not turn the ball over either. So this was the game out of all 6 games so far this season where I said, okay, Kyle McCord, in terms of football IQ, the full performance. He was making the most wise decisions he has all season long. He understood the assignment because there were some games before that where he tried to thread the needle sometimes. He knows he can't run, so sometimes that leads to some risky throws and ultimately turnovers, but this game was very different, and I think that's a big deal. Yeah, he's thrown for 300-plus yards in every single game this season, but what was different about this game against NC State is that he was much more wise in his decision-making, and it paid off. Highest completion percentage of the season, never turned the ball over either. That's a bright spot, to say the least.
He did have a higher QBR against Ohio and against UNLV, but threw a pick in both those games. The game that really stands out to me, actually, outside of the NC State game, is against Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
It's a similar split, though, as well. If you look at the amount of times that he threw the ball, 46 in that one, completed just a hair under 70%. So for McCord, I think that obviously the passing attack with him is the offense, and that's going to take Syracuse as far as it's possibly going to go.
Right, because there is still too much of an over-reliance on that. No matter how good McCord's playing, the other aspects such as the run game have
it doesn't matter how good the passing attack is. If you're one-dimensional, you're one-dimensional.
And
I would like to see a little bit more play action, but in order for that to happen, you just have to establish the run more. And right now, I don't really think that Pitt right now is not game planning LaQuint Allen running the ball more than 15 times, probably.
That's fair.
Maybe more than 20.
Yeah, none over 20.
What are your thoughts about the Syracuse split on the offense right now? You can call us 315-443-2011 or send us a text 315-556-3929. Kyle McCord throws the ball a lot. And he's good at it, but I don't think that he's good enough to be in Heisman talks. There are too many other players in the country, Ashton Jenney in Boise State, or Travis Hunter, who can play both sides of the ball in Colorado. I don't think that we should be having legitimate conversations right now about McCord for the Heisman. He has thrown 6 interceptions this season through 6 games.
Yeah, that's the flaw.
I mean, that's a glaring stat, and I think it's, like we just talked about, it's that over-reliance on his arm. That he's not.
I don't think that should hinder his, when we're talking specifically about his Heisman chances, and that Syracuse has to rely on him too much because he's delivering when they ask him to.
Sure, he's delivering in terms of
wins,
that's
not his fault.
If you go back to that Stanford game, if he can avoid one of those 2 interceptions, Syracuse probably wins that game. So
that's a difference talking about his tendency at times to throw risky passes and relying on him too much, in my opinion. I think there can be a happy medium there where he's throwing the ball a lot. I mean, he still threw the ball 42 times. That's a good amount against NC State.
That's a lot.
But he never made a dumb decision.
No, not against NC State, but the Heisman's obviously about the full picture.
Well, correct.
Right? It's not about
I'm just saying they can rely on him a lot, and he can still, make wise decisions.
I'm not saying that he doesn't have the ability to do it.
Sure.
I'm just saying that he has shown flashes where he has made poor decisions with the football. Stanford is an illustration of that, and I just think it's because the defenses are not really game planning the run. When they are, though, if you have something to say, go ahead.
I mean, I just think, again, no, he ultimately shouldn't be in the Heisman conversation. But
not for me.
As things stand right now, he's technically played well in every game. 300-plus yards in every game.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely played well.
Think,
but if you throw the ball 60 times, it's not nearly as impressive to throw for 300 yards.
Sure, but I mean, I'm with you. But I think it's still notable that no other Syracuse quarterback had ever thrown
absolutely it's
4 straight games with 300-plus yards. He's done it in all 6 games so far. He hasn't really had a bad game yet. Again, an interception now and again. But we'll see when those big tests come around, such as Pitt on the way, and then eventually Miami. Because it hasn't been the most difficult of schedules. I get they've had 2 ranked wins so far. But, against Georgia Tech and UNLV, I want to see them beat, a real big dog and see McCord, what he can do on the biggest of stages.
As we wrap up here, I just want to really quickly hit on LaQuint Allen as well, because that is the other part of that Syracuse offense, of course. And he was good. And the last 2 games has been really good. 91 rushing yards, a touchdown for LaQuint. And, of course, the week before that, went off even more and had the game-winning touchdown while he was battling through an injury as well. So certainly for LaQuinn Allen, it's been a good start to the season. He hasn't really maybe had as many carries as he would like, but when he's had the opportunity to lug it, he looks really good. And I just want to quickly say, I think I would love to see more Yassine Willis. I know that he didn't have a great game against NC State, but didn't really have a whole ton of opportunities. That UNLV game was great for him. I think he is a viable number 2 option, and that rushing, like the potential, I know we talk about the potential of Kyle McCord. The potential of this Syracuse running attack really entices me.
Well, Yassine Willis, I mean, he ran 5 times for -5 yards against NC State.
Yeah, it's 5 carries, though.
Yeah, they should get him the ball more. I mean, Willis,
yeah.
Again, like it's a lot of responsibility on him for sure, but with no Nixon anymore, Willis has to get going. It's for the run game to even be a threat to opposing defenses. It can't all be LaQuinn Allen. Again, like it's the over-reliance on the pass game that concerns me a lot about this Orange team.
Sure. All right. The Syracuse offense is preparing to face Pitt, a top 20 team, 6-0 for the first time since 1982. We're up against our first break, and when we come back, our man, Ryan Bridges, is going to talk about that Pitt team, the threat that they pose just 6 days away at Acrisure Stadium. Stick with us. Sports Night rolls on after this.
Always here for you, WAER, supported by Syracuse Stage. Keeping Central New York entertained for over 50 years, Syracuse Stage 24-25 season kicks off with the classic revenge thriller Dial M for Murder. Directed by Robert Hupp, Dial M for Murder combines vivid characters, sharp dialogue, and intrigue to depict what happens when secrets, desires, and reputations are threatened. October 16th through November 3rd, tickets at syracusestage.org.
On this week's Wait, the Secretary of the Treasury reveals how she prepared to smoke her first joint.
I always try to prepare when I can, and I thought, how can I prepare for this experience? Well, why don't I buy a pack of cigarettes and try to smoke them and see if I can inhale?
I'm Peter Sagal. Join us for a show with more life hacks from Chapel Roan, David Allen Greer, and more on the News Quiz from NPR.
Saturday morning at 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
Thanks for listening. Not a member yet? Make a first-time gift today and help empower WAER to provide trusted journalism, music discovery, and community conversation for all, no matter where you live or how you listen, from broadcast to podcast, on air and online. Members help power everything you find at WAER. Please give today at WAER.org to support this work. The Ostrom Avenue Podcast, breaking down Syracuse athletics.
The students rush the field. The Orange are bowl eligible and 6-0 for just the 3rd time in the last 87 years.
And interviewing the industry's experts.
We are now joined by a very special guest. It's Emily Leiker of Syracuse.com.
Check out video interviews on YouTube at Ostrom Avenue Podcast and weekly episodes on WAER.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back here on a lovely Friday night. The vibes are high here on Sports Night. Sam Reese alongside Luke Burgess, and the reason why the vibes just got even higher is because we have our reporter for the upcoming Syracuse football game against Pittsburgh in the house. Ryan Bridges is now with us here on Sports Night. And remember, we want you guys to call into the show as well to get your voice heard before we hear anything from this guy, Ryan. 315-443-2011 is the number to call. You can also shoot us a text, 315-556-3929. All right, well, Ryan, it's great to be with you first and foremost.
Great to see you too.
I appreciate that. And, it's a bye week for Syracuse football, but it's not too soon to look ahead to this matchup next Thursday under the lights, Syracuse at Pitt, because this is an enticing game. This is a Pitt team that was 3-9 last year, but off to a 6-0 start so far this year, ranked 20 in the nation. So what for you stands out about this Pitt team and the way they've kind of resurged here in 2024?
I mean, it has to be the offense, right? Like they bring in Cade Bell, offensive coordinator from Western Carolina. And, I mean, everything is just ignited. I mean, he has completely flipped over, whatever this Pitt offense was last year. They had some talent. They had Bub Means, who now caught a few passes, last night for the Saints. So they had talent on this offense last year, but with Eli Holstein coming in, it has just completely changed this entire offense. What he can do as a dual threat. They're averaging 480 yards per game. Syracuse is just a tick below that mark at 469. They're averaging 40 points a game. I mean, some of that is because they put up 73 against Youngstown State, but still very impressive stuff. And the offense has really caught on fire this year. It's something that Syracuse will, they're going to have their hands full, especially for a defense that you guys were just talking about has not really shown up this year.
Yeah, and I mean, you want to talk about the improvement from last year to this year. I mean, last year, Phil Jerkovic got benched halfway through the season, moved to tight end, and then they brought in Christian Veilleux. And Christian Veilleux was a bit of a disaster as well, really. I mean,
now on Georgia State, if I'm not mistaken.
You might be right there.
Yeah.
We saw him, throw a pick six against Syracuse.
Right.
Jaden Bellamy returns it the other way. I mean, they just embarrassed him in Yankee Stadium last year.
Yeah.
With Dan Villari running all over the place.
Embarrassed him now with a guy who's barely a factor in the Syracuse offense. So it's a revitalized Pitt team, and 6-0 for the first time since the early '80s, and that's because of a freshman. I mean, this kid is really impressive. He's Eli Holstein, transfer from Alabama.
Right.
What does he bring to the table in your eyes that, maybe a Kyle McCord doesn't? And what does he do so well that makes him stand out in this game in particular?
So I want to be fair to Kyle McCord when I say this, because I don't think Syracuse has wanted to take the deep shots as much. They've relied a lot on, in-breaking routes, over the middle of the field, short passes, Pena, Meeks, Gadsden in tight coverage and stuff like that. And that's how they've wanted to go down the field. NC State played a defense that limited those downfield plays. But Eli Holstein has been throwing the ball down the sideline to Kanata Mumfield. They've really taken shots this entire year, and it's paid off for them. They have several ways of getting a big play on top of the dual threat ability. I think he might be a better thrower of the football than he is a runner. And I'm not saying he isn't a great runner, but I'm saying a lot of the touchdowns that they've had this year, I've just seen him really uncork the ball. They've got talented wide receivers who, while he is scrambling out at the same time, they are also moving around with him. They know how to find the open space later on in a play. And, the offensive line is also really held up well. You watch a lot of those touchdowns that they're throwing, and he's got so much time. And it's a lot of the same concern that we had about the Syracuse team. We love LaQuinn Allen. We love Aronde Gadsden. We love Trevor Pena. I can go down the list of the amount of skill players that they can use. If the offensive line didn't transform at the start of this year, Syracuse wouldn't be where they are, and Pitt is a lot of the same story.
Well, unlike Syracuse, Pitt has a legit running back, Desmond Reed, who wasn't even supposed to be the starter this year. Rodney Hammond was supposed to be one of the focal points of this offense, but he was ineligible to start the year, and now he's come back, and he's kind of taken a backseat role. I think he had 5 carries against UNC.
Yeah, that's right.
It really just hasn't been a key factor in this offense because Desmond Reed has kind of taken that running back position.
Cade Bell was the offensive coordinator at Western Carolina.
He brought him over.
And
he brought over Poppy Williams and Sincere Lee as well in the passing game. So I really wanted to get into that, Ryan, because what Cade Bell is doing is incredible. Never mind that addition of Holstein, who's been magnificent as the quarterback, but it's going to take more than that for this Pitt offense to play as well as it has after I wouldn't even call that an offense what they had last year. I mean, that was pathetic. So to now have 3 guys come over from Western Carolina that Cade Bell coached there as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, what's going on in Western Carolina?
I know, because these guys are making a big impact. They've come onto the scene and have done wonders. So how impressed have you been with the play of not only Desmond Reed, but Williams and Lee also in the passing game?
Well, I think they give themselves time to have these deep crosses over the middle of the field. And so that's why I think Monday is going to be so key when it comes to this matchup, because that's when Fran Brown is going to go to the press conference, and that's when he's going to update us on the status of Marlowe Wax.
Right. Yeah.
Because we love what Justin Barron has done. We love the way that he fielded against NC State. But when you have guys like Reed who can catch a ball against Cincinnati and take it 55 yards to the house on a little, halfback route out of the backfield, I mean, you need to plug up the middle of the field. The deep crossers have been the main way that they've been getting the ball downfield, on top of the deep shots that they take down the sideline. And so you're going to need a lot of guys who can cover in the middle of the field, limit those deep crossers, and don't allow Holstein to, sit in the pocket as much. But, with that pass rush, if it doesn't hold up, then you got to have guys that can cover in the back.
What I want to say real quick, too, is that Holstein was not necessarily penciled in as the starter at the beginning of this year.
No,
he had to win the job in camp, right?
That's what makes it more impressive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this was not necessarily, coming into this year, I don't think the Pitt coaching staff had the mindset of, wow, we've really, reinvented the program. We're ready to go 6-0. It was more like, yeah, we have some enticing pieces, but we still are trying. There's a potential we have a redshirt freshman starting as quarterback.
Well, they loved Nate Yarnell.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was projected to be the
in
starter
May or July, or May, June, July, somewhere around then.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally were saying oh yeah, this guy is the guy coming into camp. And Eli Holstein he's just blown the doors off the place coming over from Alabama.
Fair game, too. I mean, what Pitt's doing is I respect a lot because change had to happen with the Panthers. So for, Narduzzi and the rest of his coaching staff to realize and say, all right, we're gonna give these starting spots to the guys that deserve it the most and change some stuff up if it has to be that way, then that's what it's going to take, and the results are showing right now.
Yeah, no, they certainly are. And I saw a funny story that when Cade Bell was interviewing for the offensive coordinator job, he kind of minced his words a little bit when he was talking with Pat Narduzzi because his plan was to change the entire offense, but he didn't want to say that in his interview because he didn't want to scare off the head coach. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic.
I don't mean to keep coming back to Holstein either, but I know we just talked about how good Kyle McCord was before the break. McCord has just over 2,100 passing yards this season. Holstein almost has 1,700.
Yeah.
So, this is an offense that's running the ball way more than Syracuse.
Right.
So, let's not forget about how good of a passer this kid is. I mean, he's probably an NFL quarterback in a few years.
No, definitely. I mean, he is extremely accurate, down the sideline. He has the right amount of touch. And, again, he has a lot of protection that can hold up. So I think it's up to Syracuse to put pressure on this guy because he had no collegiate starts before this season. Right. And, we've seen this team kind of struggle. And we can get into, Pitt being 6-0, how much stock do we want to put into that? They were down 27-6 to Cincinnati in the third quarter. So he has had stretches where he's fallen behind, but they have had these surges at the end. It's can Syracuse put together that 60-minute performance? They didn't really do it against NC State.
No, they didn't.
Definitely going to need to do it on the road today.
Once again, you're listening to Sports Night here on WAER. Sam Reese, Luke Burgess with you, as well as our reporter for the Syracuse-Pitt football game on Thursday, Ryan Bridges. Do you guys think that Pitt has the better offense than Syracuse? Give us a call, 315-443-2011. You can also text us on our text line at 315-556-3929. I know we've been talking a lot about this Panthers offense, but rightly so, because I would argue that they have the edge over Syracuse in that department.
I don't know
I think
about
they could.
Well,
because listen, Eli Holstein, we've been pumping up McCord, and rightly so, but Holstein has 4 games with 300 or more pass yards. That's pretty good. And unlike McCord, he can actually run the ball. He's run the ball 56 times for 266 yards.
There have been games where he's been the lead rusher.
Yeah, and Syracuse doesn't have that. They have more versatility in that offense. Come on now.
There's no doubt that they have more versatility, but
I will Syracuse's bread and butter is better than
I don't know.
Syracuse has the West Coast offense, right? They have the deep threat, and they have a ton of depth in the passing.
It's actually getting ridiculous how many pass catchers they can put out there.
Pena.
And look,
you're not even talking about Justice Ross Simmons, who was supposed to be the number 1 guy coming into this year.
I mean, and Zede Haynes is out right now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy. And you did say something, about Dan Villari, who's not really involved in the offense, but they got him involved, against NC State. Short yardage situations, they bring him, behind the center, and they do a tush-push variation. I haven't seen it not work so far this year, and it certainly worked in the NC State game. So, I mean, Jeff Nixon is just getting way too creative at this point. And, I mean, he looks like Ben Johnson out there for the Lions.
But, Ryan, I still bring it back to the point, the original question that Sam asked.
Sure.
Which offense is better?
I think it's
you can have 10 elite receivers, but if you don't have a run game,
right,
I think Pitt still has the edge because it's not like they have bad receivers.
And with Syracuse's struggles on the defensive line,
Mumfield can catch deep balls, and he's shown all season that he has the ability to be a number one guy.
I think Syracuse was able to break through against NC State. I think Murad Watson has been better. I think Fadil Diggs, when you give him the freedom to rush the passer, I think they will be better on the defensive line. They're certainly going to pose a bigger test to Pitt than anyone else has this season. Let's not act like Pitt has played better competition than Syracuse because they just simply haven't.
Correct, but I'll go back to it. They haven't. You know, they're 6-0. Kent State, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Youngstown State, UNC, and most recently Cal. Now, ironically enough, that last game against Cal, Pitt kind of went back to that gridded out type of style that I couldn't stand watching last year and years before. But the offense did score at least 28 points in those first 5 games. I'm very high on the offense, if that's not clear already.
I know, but I mean, giving up 34 points to West Virginia, giving up 27 to Cincinnati, I mean, they are scraping by in these games. If that was happening to Syracuse right now, you know, it was happening against UNLV. It happened against NC State, and rightly we criticize Syracuse. I just don't know why we don't have the same energy for the Panthers just because they have a 20 next to their name.
I mean, I think that's a good point, and I can get behind. Like you look at UNC, who gave up 70 to James Madison, and I mean Pitt beats them by 10. It's not necessarily a blowout, but in the same sense, I mean Syracuse puts up 40-something against Holy Cross. They put up 73 against FCS Youngstown. So the offense has clearly shown flashes. What all this tells me, I think we could go back and forth on this all day because there's a lot to talk about.
What does it tell you, Luke?
What it tells me is that this is going to be a really good game.
It's going to be a great game.
I mean, like
100%.
Thursday night prime time, and I mean a ton of weapons on the field, and this is kind of the spotlight game of the night. It's something.
And both
to tune
teams come in very well rested.
Yeah.
And they've already had buys, and, you know, Syracuse came off that bye, and they didn't look so
and
good
And
against
a bit of a
Stanford.
rivalry, too. That can't really be swept under the rug.
But it's been very like one-sided because
Syracuse,
like, you know, in the 50s and, you know, 60s and, you know, in the, you know, old days, they dominated, but Pitt has just absolutely dominated. I mean, Syracuse was able to win at a neutral site last year.
I think that game can be scraped from the record books.
It is crazy
with the way that it went.
It's crazy to think that game was less than a year ago, though, and how different the teams are.
Yeah, we're talking about Syracuse being one-dimensional from the passing side of the ball when I think they threw for 5 yards in the game last season.
No, I mean, it was unreal. That game, that stat sheet, I mean, it deserves to be hung in like the College Football Hall of Fame. That's how crazy it is.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, Syracuse away at Pittsburgh, I think they've lost the last 10 matchups dating all the way back to 2003.
Right.
So not a good sign.
They've been their kryptonite. Now, I want to get back to what you said here because I want to get your input too, Ryan.
Okay.
Because I don't think Syracuse football has a true rival. But I guess Pitt would be the closest to it in the ACC. But
they play them every year.
Not every team needs a rival.
Sure, no, but both teams.
Yeah, they do. I need rivalries.
You do.
Both teams were in the Big East previously.
Sure.
And they've both moved to the ACC. They play each other every year.
So what about Syracuse BC? Is that a bigger rivalry?
I would say they're like equal to me.
They're like fake rivalries.
Well, I don't think there's really any rivalries
Just
in Northeast.
playing a team does not constitute a rivalry. I think you need to deny the other team of reaching a goal. And it's, you know, okay, these are the two powerhouses in the ACC, and they're going at it, and they're
that's the problem. They're always at the cellar of the ACC.
One of them
until this year. Yeah.
Well, I think that whoever wins this game, if Pitt wins, obviously, but if Syracuse wins this game, I think that they're a top 20 team in the nation.
Yeah, I know. You certainly
there's
have to
certainly
think
something on the line, and that just adds to what I was saying a minute ago about how good this one's going to be.
So I want to know this, Ryan.
Okay.
I think we're all in agreement that this will be a close game.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yes, but Syracuse, I want to say Syracuse has the ability to run away with it, but they have to fix so many problems that they haven't in previous games. So I guess my answer is yes, it will be a close game.
All right.
If we go off of what we've seen.
So you know, in my opinion, what a big factor is in close games?
Let me guess.
Boy, I can't.
Give it to me.
Field goal kicking.
That would be a great.
Teams.
That would be a great. Yes,
Field
that's
position,
a great answer.
yes.
Special teams. So I want to ask you, like,
right.
You know, this Pitt kicker, Ben Sauls, 10 for 10 on field goals. He nailed a 58-yarder last year.
Yep.
I mean, you never really see
Last
that
week.
in college. Last week, sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm dating myself here. The special teams looks in just levels above Syracuse. I mean, the Orange can't, they make mistakes.
It's not hard
every
to
year.
look levels above Syracuse, who went to a redshirt freshman kicker.
Absolutely.
So, Brady Denneberg, the starting kicker, has been permanently benched. He only does kickoffs now. Yeah. And I mean, if that doesn't tell you something about where the special teams is.
Fran Brown. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, I just
want to ask you your question.
No. You can go on to what you were saying, but do you think this could decide the game ultimately?
I mean, I think it definitely can. I mean, it decided the Stanford game. You had Emmett Kinney on the other side, who goes 4 for 4, who's automatic. I think Syracuse is getting a little bit in their own head when it comes to going for it when they're in plus territory. I mean, you decide to go for it on a 4th and 6 at the 19. You turn down a 36-yard field goal, but then later in the game, it's a little bit more yardage. I forgot the down and distance exactly, but you go for it from 42. He misses, but he's had Jaden O is who I'm talking about here, has had the distance. He had the distance against Holy Cross. He hit it off the upright. He had the distance against NC State. He blew it to the left. So it's like, this guy is capable, but is he going to find the target? And how often do you go back to that well? I think Syracuse has been a little too aggressive in the red zone. Mm-hmm. They gave away a lot of points against NC State, and I heard you earlier in the show say that game was a lot closer than it should have been, but you never mentioned the fact that Syracuse is just leaving points on the board after having very successful drives. They're going for it on 4th down, and you don't see a receiver here. A guy drops a pass. If you have those types of mistakes against Pitt, they can come back. They came back down 21 in the third quarter against Cincinnati. They came back down 10, with I think it was against West Virginia. They were down 10 with 5 minutes to go. You can't leave points on the board, and you can't just stall momentum at the end of the game.
I guarantee they'll leave points on the board.
Syracuse. This is a huge...
By missing a field goal is what you're saying.
Huge concern for me right now.
Go ahead.
I think Syracuse is going to heavily struggle to win this game because they're on the road. Now, given Pitt's not a great atmosphere ever on the road. But certainly right now, I think Syracuse, if I'm on the offensive sideline, I am not confident in Syracuse being able to kick a 30-yard field goal to win the game.
But I'm not confident. I'm not confident that Kyle McCord is always going to complete a 4th and 6 or a 4th and 8.
Right, and that's an issue.
But they're having exactly.
Because
that's the issue.
if that's the game,
they're having to go for it because they can't trust the kicker.
With 5 seconds left and it's a 36-yard field goal, I don't think, if he just gets, if this doesn't get blocked, we're in a good spot. I think that the game could be over because of a miss.
It's a tough decision, and this is why.
Fran Brown has to think about going for it in that situation. Say 4th and 3.
He hasn't. In my opinion, he hasn't really thought about it. He's gone for it every single time that they've had a chance. The only reason why they went for the 42-yarder was because it was 4th and 12 or something like that, and so they're going for it out of necessity. But I think they gotta be careful going back to that well. Because a 4th and 6 is a little bit longer than you might think. And, on the 3rd down play, they had Trevor Pena open in the end zone. McCord tried to throw it to him on that, drive in the first half against NC State, and it gets batted at the line. And so it's you could think that you might have the play, the perfect play that's going to get us this first down, but things just happen. And so you can't always rely on one down. I love the receiving core. I love Kyle McCord, but it's on the road, the crowd's into it. It's just it's a hard thing to judge. It's hard to go about.
All right. Well, I think we're all in agreement that this is one that could come down to the wire.
Could be the best game of the year.
It could be the best game of the year. I think it has that possibility in it.
I think it will be the biggest test for both teams this season.
I'm with you there. All right, Ryan, appreciate the insight.
Thank you, guys.
Great stuff as always. Safe travels to Pittsburgh with Luke. I'll be left lonely here in Syracuse, but that's okay. Safe travels and appreciate the insight as always. That's Ryan Bridges. We'll be back here on SportsNite, Luke and I, to wrap things up. We're going to be talking some hoops because basketball season is just around the corner. Don't go anywhere. We still got more coming your way on SportsNite here on WAER.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. You can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
The Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at waer.org or wherever you get your podcast.
I'm Jesse Thorne. This week on Bullseye, Mavi, one of the most exciting rappers around today, gets real with me about the job he wishes he had.
I love teachers, though. You know, I want to be a teacher. I want to teach biology really badly. That's what I think my last job will be.
That's on the next Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR.
Sunday morning at 11 on WAER.
At Marketplace, we help you understand what's going on in the economy and why. There is no topic too large or too small, whether it's the housing market, jobs, interest rates, even the prices we are paying at the grocery store. Our independent journalism is critical in helping you connect the dots and getting the context that you need. So, join me, Kai Risdal, every weekday on Marketplace.
Weeknights at 6 on 88.3 WAER.
This week on Code Switch, how many people in the capital of Arab America are wrestling with voting when U.S. support for Israel is their top issue.
This is the first time where I've been as close to a one-issue voter as I've ever been in my entire life.
Then on Life Kit, how to get the most out of your credit card.
You can be kind of the aberration that makes money for yourself.
That's coming up on Code Switch and Life Kit.
From NPR.
Saturday morning from 10 to 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
Welcome back to Sports Night here on WAER. Luke Burgess and Sam Reese. We were just joined by Ryan Bridges. He's headed off elsewhere, and now it's just me and Sam. And we're only somehow 8 days away from the beginning of basketball season for Syracuse men's basketball, and women's basketball not that far behind. And, of course, there's actually already exhibition basketball being played. Rutgers just played.
I didn't know that.
That's a top 25 team. They played an exhibition game last night. Huh. But Syracuse men's basketball had their media day today, which means lots of exciting news. And prospects for the season upcoming, Syracuse picked 11th to finish in the ACC in the preseason poll. And if you tuned into any of our morning sports updates throughout the week, you will have heard me say that there's maybe not too much stock that should be paid into those. Preseason polls don't really matter, in my opinion, because you know who's good, right? You know that the Dukes who bring in a Cooper Flagg who gets all the attention, and the UNCs will be good, and you know that there will be bad teams as well. But the ACC looks completely different this year, and Sam, I believe a lot of guesstimating going on from everyone who voted in that poll.
Yeah, I mean that's usually what the poll is, though. I think it lays a good foundation where
everyone
thinks you're going to finish.
I think there's a melting pot in the middle of just Syracuse, just
especially
throw
in
them
this
at
conference.
11.
Yeah. So I think 11's fair because remember there's 18 teams now in the ACC.
Yeah,
way too many. And they were mediocre even last season. They were 20-12 overall, but they were only 2 games above 500 in conference play, 11-9, and there's a lot of question marks with this team. I mean, Syracuse's 2 best players last year, Judah Mintz, Malik Brown, gone.
Yeah.
So I like how they went in the transfer portal, but there's only 5 total returning players, which is the nature of modern day college basketball.
Nature of all college sports now.
But for a team that was mediocre in ACC play, they had been for several years now, I don't know how much improvement, if any, we can expect.
Sure. And, of course, Syracuse as well, the KenPom rankings preseason coming out, they're ranked 68th. So a middle-of-the-pack team with a lot of new faces, right? One of the faces that is returning, you talked about those 5 returners, is guard J.J. Starling, who transferred to Syracuse after his freshman season at Notre Dame, Baldwinsville native, so he came back home. And he was good last year. It took him a little bit of time to kind of settle in.
Took him a few weeks, but he found his stride.
But he talked about today with our Ian Nicholas over at Syracuse Men's Basketball Media Day about some of the improvements that he made over this offseason. Here's what he had to say.
I'm in a pretty good mental space right now. Way more confident, and I say my work ethic has grown. You know, I've always been the one to be in the gym, but I feel like this year I'm more consistent with it, and I'm more willing to go above and beyond with getting treatment, putting in extra work in the gym, and watching film. So.
Well, it's exciting that his work ethic has improved, but to me, it does. Like, I want to see the results on the court, and I'm not saying that in any way negative towards JJ Starling. I just think it's a lot of that media day, I'm in the best shape of my life type of talk. Of course you're going to be positive. You're not going to set a negative tone for your season before it starts.
No.
But Starling is exciting. I never really felt like we got to see everything that he was capable of last year. Mm-hmm. So the prospect of him having more of that role, well, Judah Mintz, who forgoed the rest of his eligibility, was in Summer League with the 76ers. Now he's a free agent, and he's not back. So Starling becomes the main guard on this team, at least to start the season.
Yes.
I'm excited to see what he does with more of a chance to be the leader of the offense.
I agree, because I think he understands there's a lot more responsibility on him now, because I think a reason why he struggled a bit to acclimate to Syracuse after transferring from Notre Dame at the beginning of last season is because he was trying to understand how to succeed the most he could in that kind of second fiddle role with Mintz leading the way. But now, he's more or less the man here, and I am intrigued to see how that affects him in terms of his ability to score, but also to be a facilitator and find open teammates, because there were some games last year where I was very impressed with his ability to find players and really pull off some impressive passes. So, there's more on his shoulders now, and I think he understands that now in year 2 with Syracuse.
To have a good offense or to be a good offensive player with Judah Mintz, you have to love to be a catch-and-shoot guy, because Judah Mintz is going to take the ball down the lane. And if you're open, maybe he'll dish it off. But most of the time, he was going to the foul line, or he was scoring. Or I guess it wasn't going in at all, and maybe there wasn't a foul. But that was pretty rare, to be honest.
It was.
Your thoughts about this revitalized Syracuse offense, 315-443-2011, or text us, 315-556-3929. We know that the Syracuse football offense is good, but the Syracuse basketball offense, Syracuse football can be 5-1 all they want, but Syracuse as a school is a basketball school. And with basketball right around the corner, exciting to talk about some of the new faces. Another new face, a transfer from Georgia State, Lucas Taylor, talked about the underdog mentality today that he and the rest of the team have to have. Talked about how they're ranked 11th in the ACC before the year started. This is what he had to say today.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like being the underdog always puts a lot of fire under you for sure. Just having something to prove, I feel like we all came here knowing that a little bit. We have some guys come from mid-majors, some guys transfer and whatnot, guys that I feel like we may have something to prove. And we all know that winning is going to be the way to prove that. So,
the ACC, of course, is a tough conference. I mean, that's nothing new. It's not easy.
There's two very good teams.
Two very good teams. Oh, there's other teams that
everyone
are not bad.
else is, in the mix, which is going to make for a more competitive conference and could benefit Syracuse.
Okay, if there's one team I'll give a second here, pull up the ACC preseason poll. But while I'm doing that, I'll ask you, is there one team that you really think is going to break out of that middle section this season?
There's not one that stands out, which I think.
Do you think there's anyone who can compete with a Duke UNC at all?
No. Virginia was the team I thought had the closest chance, and now Tony Bennett's gone, so I'm wondering what's going to happen over there. I guess it would have to be the Cavaliers, in my opinion, but I'm not high on the ACC. Which I think will make for a more competitive conference.
Makes it more exciting.
How many bids are they going to get when all is said and done? That could hinder Syracuse's chances, but also the competitive nature of it. And in my opinion, where a lot of teams are there in the mix that could make a statement, it could lead to, some interesting, I guess, final standings in the ACC. But it's Duke, it's UNC, and then it's everyone else.
I mean, Wake Forest was ranked 3rd, and then Clemson. Those are the only two teams ranked above Virginia, aside from Duke and UNC, of course. Duke brings in Cooper Flagg, who was the number 1 ranked prospect in the country. Syracuse brings in Donnie Freeman, who was
I'm
ranked
excited for him.
15th nationally. He brings a lot of excitement to the table.
Sure.
Because, I mean, this is a guy who can obviously score.
Yeah.
And I think that the prospect of him having success, I mean, maybe we forget a little bit about how much of a focal point Judah Mintz became in the Syracuse offense his freshman season. Donnie Freeman's a whole nother level. I mean, he should be above what Judah Mintz was last year if he fulfills his potential. So, I mean, how long is J.J. Starling really the captain of this offense? I don't know. It might not be long.
Well, that might be a stretch. I mean, Freeman is a freshman. I mean, there is going to be a lot of responsibility on him. I mean, he's
Judah Mintz led this offense as a sophomore last year, albeit not that well because the team was entirely sophomores essentially.
Correct. I still think Starling will be the leader, but make no mistake about it. Freeman, should be someone in the starting lineup right away, making an immediate impact. I mean, there's a lot of hype around this guy, and rightly so. He's the one young player I'm really excited about. And then, of course, you got a handful of transfers. I mean, just quickly, Luke, Eddie Lampkin. I'm pumped to see him take the floor because, size is something Syracuse needed. He's 6'11", 265, and he has experience playing at a high level. Started his career at TCU where he was a regular starter for the most part. And then at Colorado last year, he had 9 double-doubles. So Lampkin's a guy who I think can really jolt this team in the right direction in terms of that presence at the hoop because that size has lacked at certain points for Syracuse.
Let me correct you real quick. Size was not lacking. Effective size was lacking.
That's what I meant.
McLeod, before he got injured last season, was flat out not good.
Yes.
And the numbers back that up. He just
Correct.
was not effective as a big man and a center.
That was my point.
I mean, we saw him losing tip-offs as a guy who stands at 7'6". Is that right? I believe so.
7'5", something like
7'5", 7'6".
At least a couple feet taller than me.
At least.
Yeah.
Sam Reese sitting across from me at about 5'6", I believe.
Yes.
Syracuse.
Maybe 5'6.5".
Men's basketball hasn't been to the tournament in some time. Did they make a run this year?
No. I don't think
Why
they'll
not?
make the tournament because there's too many question marks. There's too much uncertainty. Again, there's guys that I think could make a solid impact. Jaquan Carlos is another one from Hofstra, and then you got Jair Davis from Delaware.
Yeah.
These guys are playing at a good level, but at the mid-major level.
Right.
This is a big step up in the ACC. I don't think Syracuse has enough to get into the tournament. There's too many unknowns. I would love for them to prove me wrong. Too many unknowns, in my opinion.
Syracuse men's basketball, of course, a huge topic, always going to draw the most attention. I do quickly want to talk about the women's basketball team because they were in March Madness last year. Now you lose De'Asia Fair. She's playing overseas in Israel.
Yeah.
And an entirely new look team there. Maybe Sophie Burrows becomes the new captain. Of course, Georgia Woolley goes into another year, her final year with the program. What do you think about this team going into this year? Because you lose a lot of pieces. You lose Alyssa Latham to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Elena Rice gone. A lot of faces that you really expected to contribute this year. Now, maybe some question marks in year 3 for Felicia Legette-Jack? Yeah, there are. I will say the freshman class looks promising, but you can only put so much responsibility on them. You got a 4-star recruit in Kira Scott. I'm excited to see what she does. But yeah, when you lose 3 starters, there's a lot of uncertainty with this team, too. I have to think they'll end up digressing. Now, you have a couple of transfers in Journey Thompson.
You mean regressing, not digressing.
Yes,
digressing
correct.
is what you're doing right now.
Apologies, yes. Thanks for correcting me there.
You're all good.
I think they will take a step back, just because there's not as much talent there.
I agree. It would be hard not to. You lose your top scorer who, I mean, was really one of the top scorers in all of the ACC for quite some time.
I mean, losing De'Asia Fair, you can't replace
No.
it. And also, unlike the men's ACC, the women's ACC is legit.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
it's
no question.
unbelievable.
It is, in my opinion, the best conference in the country.
So that makes it even tougher, in my opinion. The women also, like the men, I know you're not a big fan of these preseason polls, but
I'm not.
But the women also projected to finish 11th. I also think that's fair. They're going to be right on the fringe. I think it might be a year where they don't make the tournament.
I'm going to have to agree with you. I just think that Felicia Legette-Jack is a great coach when it comes to motivation, but I do think that she needs the pieces in place, talent-wise, in order to actually get there. And Georgia Woolley it's going to take time, regardless of how good she is, to step up into that next role. That's all we got for you this Friday night on SportsNite. Enjoyed talking a little bit of hoops, a little bit of football with my guy Sam Reese. Brought in Ryan Bridges. Had some great talk. Syracuse football only 6 days away from going on the road to take on Pitt. We'll have that broadcast here for you on WAER. Game time is at 7:30. Countdown to kickoff begins at 7 o'clock, and the double overtime runs until 12:30 with Jordan Leonard and our wonderful engineer, Tyler Aiken. You've been listening on WAER Syracuse. Thanks to our producer, Alex Ramol, our engineer, Tyler Aiken, and our desk, Nick King and Nick Evans, doing great work all night. Have a great night, Syracuse.